Right. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Roger Noble, Chairman of the Flathead County Board of Health. We're going to have a special meeting today regarding some rulemaking. It's June 28th, 2022. With that, I'll call the meeting to order. And Janelle, could you please do a roll call?
Artis,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Rod, Roger,
Here.
and Ronald Lee hasn't made it on yet.
All right, thank you all for attending. With that, we have an agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda on any modifications there?
I'll make a motion for the agenda.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as provided. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, our first real item on the agenda is citizen comment. I want to preface this in that this is general comment. There's a separate public comment once we get into the rulemaking. So if anyone in the audience would like to provide general comment outside of what's on the agenda, feel free to do so now. And Janelle, you can see if there's anybody on Zoom that wants to provide general public comment. Please raise your hand and we'll let you do so. There is a little hand.
Mhm. I do not see one. I know that Kate Wilson wanted to speak on Zoom, but I don't see her on. Okay.
Is it general or is it relative to the rulemaking? Okay, yeah. And there will be a special session for that. Okay, with that, it appears there's no general public comment. We'll close that portion and move on to the public hearing for the proposed amendments to the Flathead County regulations for sewage treatment systems. So with that, the first thing in the audit I want to do is allow Mr. Russell to provide us a summary of what all of these rulemaking changes are. And from that, then we will hear comments from proponents in support of it. And then we'll hear comments for those who are opposed to it or have a different perspective. So with that, I guess, Joe, you want to?
So we're contemplating changes to Section 8 and Section 10 of the Flathead County regulations for sewage treatment systems. First section, Section 8 is more of a housekeeping matter. When we did the regulations a couple months ago, we inadvertently left out a couple of systems that needed to either go to certified design or by default go to registered professional engineers. These systems don't need professional engineers to do. So we're basically adding bed design or replacement can be done by certified engineers or certified designers, not professional engineers. And the other thing is, and this follows the Department of Environmental Quality, when level 2 is proposed, and primarily that's through the Subdivision Act, we wouldn't usually see level 2 proposed in this environment unless there was an engineer involved with it. But if level 2 is proposed on a subdivision that's been approved, there's no reason why a certified designer can't actually submit plans for that. The package, it's a package plant, there's nothing to do, there's no design associated with it. So if level 2 advanced treatment units are required in front of any of the other disposal systems that are listed, then that's an acceptable. That's acceptable for a certified designer. But those are primarily going to be in front of the subdivision. It's already been required to use level 2. No need to go back to an engineer to do that. So that's section 8. So some of that seems to me more housekeeping, something that we forgot to list. The second one is section 10.2. And this is basically the footnote to the table. The footnote A, Janelle, if you go back and stop right, go back and stop right there. No, go the other way, and then stop when I say stop. Stop. Throughout this table, we have footnoted different things that are found in this footnote section below section 10. Footnote A states variance to these setbacks will not be considered for new construction. Now, we, primarily the health officer through the work of the Environmental Health Committee, has proposed to remove the footnote A for groundwater table, bedrock, and impervious layers. And this has come about. We've already had one appeal of the health officer's decision around that 2.5 months ago. But basically, you overturned my decision and heard a variance. I have 2 more of these sitting on my desk that will either go to an appeal if this regulation doesn't change, or it will, or you won't hear it, and it will go to DEQ for their decision. A few things other that I want to mention about this is I have had a lot of discussions with our county attorney, and our county attorney believes that not allowing someone to be heard at the local level may constitute a takings of property. Because we're literally stating that if their property was created, and these aren't 20 or 40 acres, we'll find a site for those. We're talking about old platted subdivisions in the canyon, around Kalispell, around Columbia Falls, that literally, if they don't meet 48 inches to groundwater, then our regulations basically say you can't even have a variance for the board, which means that property was created to be developed as a residential property, and we're not going to allow it. On the advice of our county attorney, said this is a really bad practice and can be construed as a constitutional taking of property. With that in mind, we went back to our environmental health committee and had a discussion around this. And at least from my position, and I won't call on the environmental health committee, from my position, why put our regulations into a taking environment? We should just hear the variance and act upon the variance. What I think a few folks are very concerned about is this is a lessening of our standards. Well, it's not a lessening of our standards for sewage treatment systems. It's actually anytime we get into a variance requirement, the board increases the standard based on the conditions that we grant variances to. We can't pollute. Our conditions say we will not pollute groundwater or surface water. Your standard that we require is not going to allow that. We're not going to lessen the distance between the 48. We're not going to allow a system to go in with only 24 inches of treatment media. We're going to do the same thing we always do and require that 48 inches of treatment media. So I think there's a lot of folks thinking we're lessening our standards for treatment. In no way, shape, or form will we lessen our standards for treatment by doing this. We're actually, in some of these, yes, we're going to allow properties to develop that may not have been developed in the past, but the standard that we're going to treat to is going to be exceptionally high. And the one that I do have on my desk that I held back on, we did the non-degradation analysis, and it is almost no significance when you put level 2 and sand mounds. Last point I want to make. We have numerous properties out there, and I Seawood would attest, that every year they put in different pipe and a different cycle. And they're continuing to wait for a drought cycle where all of a sudden, miraculously, this pipe that's 200 feet away is groundwater is now, last year it was at 30 inches, and this year it's at 54, and they can develop. Well, we know it's the cycle, water cycle, that drives the fact that they pass. And my staff knows from a long time ago, you live by the pipe and you die by the pipe. And if you now accept that pipe because it passed this year, and you know that in other years it doesn't, you're better off designing to the strictest standard and stop letting people fish for every year. I had a property out by the Whitefish Sewer Plant that in a drought cycle was able to pass one year. And the next year we had a normal season. And the only thing you could see on that property in the spring was the house and the top of the drain field. It's time to stop playing around with the regulations and design to the strictest standard and stop letting people fish for. And I think this helps us just say, we're not going to continue to do this. You're going to design this. You're going to go to the Board of Health and you're going to ask for a variance. As much as I've said about this, and I don't want to monopolize this conversation anymore, we're not going to lessen for surface water. And I will tell you, over the 25 years I've been bringing variances to the board, we've only had one. Me as the health officer, we've only lessened the setback to surface water one time. And it would have never happened here because it was for a replacement. Oftentimes, the only time you're going to see property where the setback to surface water can't be met is when someone buys a parkland in the county. And it's 80 feet deep, and they think they're going to come to us and get a variance. I don't think that we want to move down that slope. We'll stay away from surface water. We'll focus on these. Other times, I guess I do have one other comment. There are platted subdivisions out there that screwed up and missed the groundwater, and they're literally sitting there undeveloped because of this rule. And that's about where I want to stop right.
Thank you. All right, so that was a good summary. So do the board, any board members want to provide any additional comments? I guess I'll just say that, we're not, to kind of summarize what Joe was saying, we're not changing any of these setbacks. And this is relative, just the new, what used to be called new construction units. And we're seeing more and more of these come in. We're not going to waive them. They still have to go through all of the review process, through all the environmental staff review and approval. And the staff will pick up that they need a variance, and then they will bring them to the environmental health committee. We have a separate subcommittee for reviewing those things. And there's 3 members on this committee that have extensive experience with water quality, septic system construction, and septic system design. So they're going to receive a pretty arduous review to even get an approval for a variance. And I want to stress again, it's relative to new construction. So they still have to meet all of the non-degradation standards for approval to both surface water and groundwater. And the thing is, with these systems, they're going to be level 2, they're providing nitrate at 50, it gets reduced to 24 milligrams per liter. And a sand mound also provides much better absorption and treatment than some natural systems do, where it's just plain old gravel. So, so there's still going to be a pretty rigorous assessment, but what's happened is also all of the easy lots have been developed. And so now we're seeing these more difficult lots come in, and we're going to see this a lot more. So this is just kind of a timely amendment or adjustment to the rules is really what it is. So that's my comment. So with that, we'll take initially we'll take public comment from those in the audience that are proponents of this change. Is there anyone either on Zoom or in the audience that would like to speak to this? Do you know, Ms. England?
No.
All right, it doesn't appear there's any proponents or those want to speak in support of the rule change. We'll now hear from the opponents or people that like to provide their comments relative to the other side. So I guess we'll start with the people that are in the audience. If you'd please provide public comment, come to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll listen to your public comment.
Good afternoon, Mary Flowers on behalf of Citizens for Better Flathead, 135 Main Street here in Kalispell. I want to appreciate the prior discussion. This has come up quickly, and it is an issue that certainly caught our attention. For those of you who don't know about Citizens for Better Flathead, we are a nonprofit. Excuse me. And our mission is to champion sustainable solutions needed to keep Flathead ecologically and environmentally healthy. And that certainly includes water quality issues that come up, such as this. We were founded back in 1992, and we've been working on issues like this ever since. But we haven't been here for a while. So. But we do want to share with you our concerns for Section 10. We believe that the change that you're proposing is a significant concern for the public and deserves a broader review of this proposed rule change. I think that there may be a testimony from the Flathead Basin Commission representative, so I don't want to duplicate anything background wise, but I think it is important, and we have been attending the work that the Flathead Basin Commission has been doing on septic systems. They've made this a priority to really look at it and model existing risks from current septic systems and develop a tool to predict overall understanding of the effectiveness of future septic systems across the basin. The goal of this mapping project, once vetted by the external peer review that it's going through, is to come back and to sit down with Board of Health like this and to really talk about how do we improve the protection of our groundwater in situations where septic systems are not operating in a safe and protected manner. Given the very short notice for the review and discussion of this rule change, we ask that you table any decision on this rule change and request and allow for review and input from the Flathead Basin Commission and others before moving forward with this change. This has come up quickly, and I respect and appreciate the years of work Joe has done for our county and wanting to get this done before he left. But I feel like We were unable to get the minutes for the June 16th meeting to even understand some of the background until yesterday, and to view that. At that time, we heard concerns raised by some board members. It was difficult to hear, so it was hard to know who said what. This was going to require long-term leadership and qualified staff to do this kind of review. And we are concerned both with the recent notice that DEQ put out looking for just professionals throughout the state to apply to review permits because they don't have enough staff to do it. We're also deeply concerned as proposed. We don't see additional standards and criteria established for making this rule change. Assertions made during your board discussion on the 16th that DEQ is already overruling decisions made by your department in granting these variances, and that anyone can demonstrate no harm to water quality, but that this rule change will allow you to condition variances, raise even greater concern for us that this rule change needs to be revisited and standards and criteria need to be reviewed and established for evaluating such requests. As you're likely aware, MDQ has been sued, including by our organization recently, and these court cases are moving through the courts, challenging the lack of a factual basis for granting variances by the department in septic system approvals, lack of their consideration of the cumulative impacts of septic system approvals as required under the Montana Clean Water Act, and the department's failure to allow meaningful public comment. All of these points, I think, really encourage us to urge you to take additional time to have this proposed rule change vetted excuse me, for compliance with EPA's delegation of authority, excuse me, to the Montana DEQ and Montana DEQ's delegation of this authority to the County Health Board. We also urge you to provide for your hearing record a written factual basis for this proposed rule change and how it will provide a higher level of protection for waters of this county. I understood that Joe just made some of those arguments, but I think the public and they should be part of this hearing record and a written set of findings for your consideration. We've provided for you some of the standards under Montana ARMs, and I won't dwell on those other than to say that we want to see that standards that there are criteria and processes that are in place to really make sure that findings are adopted when to support any variance that is offered. Finally, the proposed rule change fails to provide a factual record. I was just making that point. There's also confusion in wording, and maybe it's only confusion on my part, but when these were presented to the county commissioners, the statement was made that to allow for this hearing today, that this would not impact new construction. But as worded in the before you and in the chart, and particularly where the chart removes the variance setbacks will not be considered for new construction. When that gets removed under groundwater, bedrock, and impervious surfaces, to me, that means that new construction is going to be impacted by this change, and variances would be allowed. If that's not the intent, then that certainly needs to be clarified and rewritten within this proposed change. Finally, under Montana Code annotated 50-2-116. It clearly sets forth that the regulations must describe standards for granting variances from the minimum requirements that are identical to standards promulgated by the Department of Environmental Quality. Those were not included in the presentation of this change. And if you feel like you are meeting that, it needs to be part of your findings and be provided to the public. So in conclusion, we think that while this may have some merit, we do not believe that the materials that have been provided are adequate to move forward. And in particular, with the work that's been done by the Basin Commission, we really urge you to collaborate with agencies like that to look at the appropriateness of this rule change. Thank you.
My name is Steve Rosso. My address is 18988 Medicine Rock Lane in Lakeside. And I'm here representing the Flathead Lakers. I'm also a non-commissioned member of the Flathead Basin Commission on-site wastewater treatment committee. About 60% of the homes and businesses in Flathead County are on septic systems, and more than half of those are over 50 years old. Thousands of property owners will be having to replace their current septic fields in coming years. Flathead Basin Commission, Flathead Lakers, and Whitefish Lake Institute have placed the issue of non-point source pollution from individual wastewater treatment systems at high priority in their program work. Allowing variances to setback limits for locating new septic fields sends the wrong message as our population grows and the health and environmental impacts increase. I listened to the recording of your meeting when you discussed these changes initially, and as Mary mentioned, it's pretty hard to keep track of what's going on and hear everybody and stuff. And so I apologize if some of my comments really don't pertain, but I would like to have some clarification. So during your discussion, if you could maybe answer a few questions for us. The footnote being considered in section 10 says it applies to new construction. It would be helpful to know what's included in new construction, what that means, and how that affects replacement systems. There was also some discussion today already about whether or not removing this footnote applies to all 4 of the places that it's listed in the chart, or just to the bottom 3, and that it's going to remain in place for the surface water setback. So I'm wondering about that. I also wonder about if indeed you are going through a variance program, if someone is denied a variance, can they go back to DEQ and get an approval and go ahead and construct in the setbacks, even though you denied it? So I wonder who has jurisdiction there to make a final decision. I'm also concerned about, as Mary has mentioned, her concern about standards being set. I'm a little concerned that if there aren't good standards set, that decisions to grant variance may not be properly based. And I have some experience because I've served on the Flathead, or on the Lake County Planning Board and the Lake County Board of Adjustment for about 10 years, and I'm still on both of those boards. And we undergo the variance procedure and have specific standards that we meet. And I think that it's critical that standards include deciding whether there are any alternatives to the application. And it seems like to me that there is an alternative of holding tanks that, although they're certainly not first choice and maybe get denied in a lot of situations, there may not be any reason why a holding tank can't be used if indeed these setbacks can't be met. So I'm wondering just how many variances would be granted if indeed an alternative exists. And I think that in most cases, an alternative likely would exist. I think that the standards that should be considered for granting a variance would include legitimate hardship, evaluating alternatives, determining as to whether or not the variance would adversely affect the public health, safety, and welfare, and making sure that only the minimum variance necessary to alleviate the hardship is granted. I would suggest that if indeed you don't have all of this in place, maybe postponing making this change would be the best until the board is prepared to correctly evaluate and grant variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to provide public comment? Janelle, is there anybody on Zoom that would like to provide public comment?
Yes, it's Kate Wilson.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, you will be allowed to make a presentation.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today. I am Kate Wilson, I'm the administrator for the Flathead Basin Commission. And just a little background, the commission was created in 1983 by the Montana legislature to focus on protecting the high quality of natural resources of the Flathead Basin with an emphasis in water quality. Currently, we have prioritized non-point source pollution, as a few of the other speakers have mentioned, and the focus is really on septic leachate and stormwater. So over the last couple of years, the Basin Commission has taken numerous actions to address this issue and work closely with regulators and counties to do so. An example of this is our septic leachate risk map, of which you should have my staffer there in the room, Emily, who brought a little preview for you today. But the real focus of this is to identify vulnerable areas that really should be protected from septic leachate pollution, and to work closely with folks like you and local government to identify where these areas are, and including, of course, groundwater, bedrock, and other impervious surfaces, and surface water itself. We are hoping to bring this to you, planning to in the next month or two before it kind of goes live. And so I think the timing of this is pretty concerning. Secondly, we helped to sponsor a workshop a couple of weeks ago at the Flathead Lake Biological Station. We did invite numerous folks from Flathead County and the health department, and unfortunately no one was able to attend from Flathead County. So I'm just kind of showcasing some of the ways we've been trying to really engage. And I guess at this point, we're just, we heard about this yesterday, so it feels very rushed. And I think there's a lot of other opportunities that we could work together to really strengthen our protections for water quality, and take into account these kind of, properties that may be problematic and need a higher level of treatment. So at this time, I would really encourage you to not make any rush decisions and work with partners like us to help mitigate the existing concerns that we have with septic leachate and septic systems out on the landscape, especially with the high rate of growth that we're facing in the Flathead. It's pretty impossible to go back in time and correct some of these problems. So they're out there already. And we're hoping that we could work with you really closely on proposed rules or changes in the future moving forward. So thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Is anybody else on remote that would like to make public comment?
No.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for the public comment. With that, we'll close the public comment session of this meeting and move to the executive action on the proposed amendments for the sewage treatment systems. Joe, the first item on this is private property assessment.
In preparation for the board moving this to the governing body. Two documents must actually go into the record. The first one is the stringency analysis, and if you don't mind, just read that. So this is the matter for the sewage treatment systems regulation change. The board's authority to propose for adoption the amendments associated hereto is found in subsection 50-2116 of the Montana Code Annotated. Pursuant to this section, House Bill 521, the board may not propose for adoption a rule that is more stringent than comparable state regulation or guidelines that address the same circumstances, unless the board makes certain written findings establishing the need for the rule. These amendments do not establish a more strict regulation than a comparable regulation. And I do need to talk at some point to another matter that parallels this, but these are not more strict. They parallel DEQ's regulations. So in my belief, and I think we need to take action on this, that you would concur that these regulations are not more strict than the government laws. And then the other document that I've prepared and I do is the Private Property Assessment Act checklist. And it's a checklist that it was adopted through the DEQ's process. And I'm just going to go through and mention if it's a yes or no. This is just a yes or no table as we go down. Number one, does the action pertain to land or water management or environmental regulation affecting private real property or water rights? Yes. Does the action result in either a permanent or indefinite physical occupation of private property? No. Does the action deprive the owner of an economically viable use of the property? It does not. No. Does the action deny a fundamental attribute of ownership? No. Does the action require a property owner to dedicate a portion of property or to grant an easement? Yes. Is there a reasonable specific connection between government requirement and legitimate state interest? No. Is the government requirement roughly proportional to the impact on the proposed use of the property? No. Does the action have a severe impact on the value of the property? No. Does the action damage the property by causing some physical disturbance with respect to the property in excess that is not sustained by the public generally? The answer is no. And those are the ones that have to be answered. And at some point, Roger, you will have to take action on this.
All right, so with that also, I guess this is the opportunity for to provide rebuttal comment if we want to enter anything else into the record. Is there further you'd like to state?
If you don't mind. I think the comments certainly by Mary, Steve, and Kate are it's nice to have them on the record. And it actually gives us an opportunity to talk to some of these. And Steve, to your point, and to Mary, your point, and Steve's elaboration on it, the conditions set forth to granting variances are the same as the ones found in the statute for the Department of Environmental Quality. So when this board acts upon a variance, they look at those conditions that are set forth by DEQ and that have been promulgated in our regulations. So they're exactly the same. And they deal with water quality, they deal with the minimums. Is this the minimum variance that can be granted? Our board goes through these findings every time we grant a variance, whether it be for new construction or some other reason, or replacement of systems. The issue about what constitutes a replacement was a really good question, because oftentimes we see folks that replace systems so they can add bedrooms or some other things to their property. We don't want to we actually feel that taking the footnote out actually allows the board in all circumstances to consider those for new construction and require a variance. So we can request a higher level of treatment for those systems. I think the board is very cognizant of the fact that we are here to protect water quality. And I will clearly state that Flathead County's regulations are as strict as any regulations in the state. We employ uniform distribution on every system that goes in Flathead County. You can't say that for any of our surrounding counties. So I think that, Mary, your point, we do have some pretty good regulations, and we don't want to lessen those regulations by taking this footnote out. This is clearly an issue around taking the property, and the fact that I don't want our board or the Board of County Commissioners to be sued because we're taking property without giving people an opportunity to at least be heard at the local level without going to the state. But to your point, Steve, we do use the same conditions to grant variances that are found in the Department of Environmental Qualities, the Montana Code annotated and in the administrative code. I think that was the biggest point I needed to make.
Can you speak to the that the DEQ could come in and just override if we didn't grant a variance, that they could you speak to that, please, Joe?
So because we use the same standard, and let's say because we have this on there, what's occurred in the past is I will not, because of footnote A in 10.2, I will not allow them to be heard for a variance in front of the board. I'm the lead staff person, so I cannot allow the variance to go forward. What occurs at that point is they will appeal the decision of the health officer to the Board of Health. And if the Board of Health overturns it, then we will hear a variance. If we were to, it is my, and I have talked to the lead counsel for DEQ, they're going to apply very strict water quality standards based on non-degradation. That's all they can do at the state level. And it is my thought at that point that most of these variances may be granted at the state level because they can only narrowly look at those water quality standards, those conditions in there. Our board has the ability to put even stricter conditions on any proposal that comes forward. So we may be stuck with a lesser, a variance to a lesser standard than the Board of Health would possibly grant. I think the leadership and the staff would really push to always see the highest level of treatment for anything that comes to the board. I may be leaving in 2 days, but I don't think the legacy will leave with me. I really do believe that we will continue to hold the highest standard at the staff level and what our board of health does. Jess, did I do good enough?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, with that, I guess I'd have a couple of more comments myself. I think somebody mentioned that DEQ has a request for proposals out now to have additional engineering support services just because they can't handle the amount of applications they're receiving. And I've been on calls as early as yesterday with DEQ, and they have new people coming in that they're training that don't even have an understanding of some of these regulations. So the fact that we can keep this in-house and review it with experienced and qualified people, I think adds another level of protection to it, and it also allows Flathead County to process these applications faster. So if they go to DEQ, they're going to sit there for 6 months. Also, to speak to the variance process that Joe mentioned, we've had a variance or two come in front of us that came in with an engineer's stamp on it, and we required them to go from level 2 to level 3 treatment in a couple of instances. So we're taking that extra step of water quality protection. And I guess finally, I'll just give you a little background. I came to the valley in 1984, worked with the Flathead Lake Biological Station on a groundwater study. That study essentially required, or was the reason that Evergreen got connected to a central septic system because of the nitrate and phosphorus concentrations that we found. So I've been involved with groundwater protection, water quality protection for nearly 40 years. So I'm not going to back off on anything. So I just want to assure you that I wouldn't support this unless I felt that the level of protection is there. So with that, I guess we have entered all of our comments into public record.
Steve, you had asked one other thing. It does not, footnote A does not go away for surface water. For construction. That was a question that you asked.
The footnote's not going away, it's just that
Only for groundwater.
yeah, just those lower 3 items, right, away from those.
Thanks for clarifying that. I guess to clarify one other thing, Steve, and I'll let Joe maybe comment to this too. I think Lake County allows for holding tanks, but Flathead County does not.
In certain situations, you can use them temporarily. And no good thing will come from holding tanks over time.
Lake County didn't used to because of that same problem. People would ignore pumping them and then they would overflow. And so I know that's a problem. If they're properly maintained, they do super well.
So we'll move on then. I guess the next action items, do we need to adopt these 2 things? Okay, so I guess I need first I need a motion that we accept the Private Property Assessment Act checklist.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Okay. So moved and seconded to accept the private property checklist review. Any comment? Any discussion? Janelle, could you please do a roll call?
Artis,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
and then Ronnalee did join.
Yes,
Ronnalee,
yes.
Okay, the next item is we need to have a motion to approve or accept the stringency analysis that was completed. Is there a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion to approve the stringency analysis.
Second. Okay. So moved and seconded to accept the stringency analysis as provided in the board's packet. Any discussion? Comment? Janelle, could you please do a roll call?
Artis,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
and Ronnalee.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Finally, I guess we need to then move this forward and executive action on the proposed amendment to Flathead County regulations for sewage treatment systems to the Board of County Commissioners. So we will need a motion for that. I'll make that motion.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to move forward with forwarding the proposed amendments to the Flathead County regulations for sewage treatment systems. Janelle, could you please go?
Artis,
Yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Pete, Pete, Rod,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Ronali.
Yes.
So with that, thank you all. So with that, we move to board member discussion. Rod?
Thank you. I just want to make one comment about the process being rushed. And that may appear that way for people who just tuned in at the last meeting, but this has been going on since prior variances and been in discussion at considerable length at other meetings as well. And that being said, we do follow the state law when it comes to noticing these things. So I don't think it has been rushed. I don't think this has been pushed through to alleviate anybody's fears out there listening. I think processes have been followed thoroughly and for a lot longer than just, the public notice period. And I wanted to echo also, Roger, the fact that, I'm appointed by the mayor and the city council to sit here. And one of those reasons was because of my concern for water quality and my experience with sewer in an actual treatment facility and Evergreen and our involvement with that. So there are members on this board outside of, the people who do septic and stuff that have those concerns and they're deep rooted. And I think that says a lot for this board and what we're going to be going forward. That's all.
I don't have any comments.
I would just agree with what Rod just said. We haven't talked about this every time we've had a variance come forward with us and the implications, and we are much more strict, I think, given an opportunity to strengthen our requirements is a great tool that we have here. And by making sure they come here instead of just getting routed to overwork DEQ is a good move. This has been in discussion since I got here. I started in January, so it's not new. I totally agree. It's going to make the process work much better.
Thank you. Jessica, Ronali, or Pete, do you have any final comments?
I would just say that I think a follow-up discussion, kind of just reiterating my comments from last time, is to maybe revisit the composition of the board, because at this time we're very lucky to have very well-experienced environmental health experts on the Board of Health. But since we do have so much power in this area, especially regarding the quality of the water, I think maybe we need to revisit kind of the minimum requirements for the people that are on the Board of Health in the future, just so we don't lose that kind of expertise in the future. Just like we require one MD on the board, I think maybe we should also think about who we require as far as environmental health standards and for the future of our county.
Thank you. Ronali?
No, all's good here.
So I guess with that concludes our meeting today.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
All right. Can you adjourn us now? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Happy 4th of July.